One of the more common games is the cultural meaning game, and it works like this. The totality, the ecology, the one, is broken into pieces. Now, they're not real in the sense that no piece works without the rest of the ecology, without all the other pieces. But what language does is it compartmentalizes things in our mind, which in some ways makes our mind sick, right? Because the reality is it's all connected, right? You don't get these flowers without the branches. You don't get the branches without the trunk. You don't get the trunk without the wind, without the rain. You don't get the trunk without the roots, right? You don't get the soil without a large cycle of life, and on, right? But in language, we take things and we put them into little compartments. And what we like to do in the descent into duality is we like to compartmentalize the good things and the bad things, which is, of course, tricky, right? Because you can say the flowers are the good things and the soil, the mud, is dirty. It's the bad thing, right? You can say that, but a scientist, anyone aware of the process of life will say, well, you don't get the flowers without the mud, without the soil, right? It's the mud that's producing the flowers. But nonetheless, this is why it's a game, right? So we take things and we make these little boxes, these little compartments. Now, into these compartments, we should actually probably draw them as cups, right? So into these compartments, the culture, the group, the majority packs meaning, right? And it does so with more little boxes, with more little words, right? So we start packing meaning, we start packing these symbols, these words, with meanings. Now, what's creating the charge? Because you could call it the weight of an object, the weight of a word, the charge of an object. What creates the charge? Well, it's first of all physiological, right? Because as an infant, as a child, you assume that the people who are still alive, who are older, the giants in the world, actually know a thing or two, right? And so when you experience as an infant, as a child, as an adolescent, all the giants, reacting, the intensity of the reaction is gauged intuitively. And based on how many giants, how consistently, and how intensely react, we learn what matters in the cult, in the culture. So we learn a tremendous amount by, Dad's always talking, but you ask him this one question and silence, right? It's a significant event, right? It never happens except when this one thing happens. Or Mom's always cheerful except when this one person arrives, and then she's completely depressed, right? So the physiological symptoms, how unordinary are they? How intense are they? And what are they associated with? This is what creates meaning, right? You just assume, right? You just assume that the giants know something about the world that they're living in. And so their physiological response over a lifetime packs these jars with meaning, with significance, just by witnessing. So that's one source of charge, is the physiological response. The other is the behavioral response, right? So you have behavior, you have physiology, then you also have language. You also have the degree of conformity, and finally you have reaction. Now, reaction is, you can think of things like the death penalty. It's a pretty strong reaction. Universal condemnation, the death penalty, seizure of assets, shaming the family, blah, 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 right? So you've got a very, very high intensity of reaction. And you've also got rank, right? What's the social rank of the reaction, right? Because some things will be commented on by the parents, some things will be commented on by a teacher, some things will be commented on by a governor or by a county commissioner or by a judge. And some things will be commented on by the president, the emperor, the peak person, right? And so the things that are most significant get commented on, get reacted to by the highest in a power structure. Now, to get a totally charged thing, like if you want something to be highly reactive, now what's obviously like something that's highly reactive, radioactive, etc., is something that's it's been packed with all this form of energy from a nuclear explosion. But culturally reactive, you can think of a topic, an arena that everyone reacts to, that is reacted to from the lowest ranking members of the cult to the highest ranking members of the cult, and that the reaction is social, financial, legal, and physical, right? Because a lot of things, they're just legal, like you pay a penalty or go to jail. What about the things where someone will torture you or take away your life? So you have this territory of reactivity. And the most charged topics are reactive on all dimensions by the entire range by 95% of the people. That's a very, 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 very reactive charge, right? So these things get very heavy, right? So in the United States, for example, abortion tends to be among the higher topics. Capital punishment can be up there. Corruption, molesting a child, for example, would be up there. Most people have a point of view around it. It's an intense point of view. There's a visceral reaction, whatever. And so you have these little words, right? Because they are words, right? Molesting a child is, 3 words. But in its reality, first of all, there's a tremendous amount of latitude, right? Does that mean hitting a child? Is that hitting a 7-year-old child? Is that hitting a 1-year-old child? Is that by a family member, a non-family member? Is molesting a caress? Is it a kiss on the cheek? Is it a kiss on the lips, right? Is it a touch of the genitals? Is it consensual, right? Some children play with their genitals and get excited, etc., and are enjoying themselves. Is it consensual in that sense? Or is it sees someone rip them away from their parents and, violently rape them? There's a tremendous range in the territory, but the words molesting a child, right? They're a box, they're a container. And the reaction is to the symbol. We very often do not go into the subtlety, the distinctions. Is it a cultural phenomena, right? You have things like, for example, the circumcision of an infant. Now, what could be more barbaric than without consent taking a male and cutting off some of their foreskin without anesthetics by a stranger genital mutilation by a stranger in an unfamiliar environment, right? And what are the impacts of that? But something that is culturally sanctioned has a different meaning than you could touch a boy's genital and give them pleasure, right? Which would be horrifying, right? That would be sexual molestation of a child. Or you can chop off the foreskin of a penis, which is called circumcision, which doesn't have a charge. Well, that's just what we've been doing for thousands of years, right? But if you reverse the cult dynamic, and you arrive in some tribe where they do not genitally mutilate the males with your knife, and you take some kid and chop off their foreskin, what are you doing? Who are you? What the fuck? Give me a break. In the same sense, if you take, if you take a child from a culture that is sexually proactive, and let's say, it's part, by age 7, you get a lesson in masturbation by the elder, or, something along those lines. And, you bring a child like that into a culture where perverts molest children. Now that child says, of course, you must be one of the elders, right? And so is it molestation, right? If it's familiar, if it's sanctioned, is it genital mutilation if it's sanctioned, right? And then, of course, we're fine with mutilating boy genitals in our culture, but we're horrified at the idea that the clitoris would be clipped in certain African tribes, which is the significant, which marks the transition into womanhood, right? And so what I'm getting at is that, first of all, there's a very large space between the words of a particular, archetype, whatever it is, abortion, genital mutilation, sexually molesting a child, etc. And a tremendous range in making the meaning of that for both the child and, so in any event, you have an exchange, which means you have an initiator and a recipient, right? And depending on the cultural context, the initiator may be committing a crime in their own mind, and the recipient may be receiving a blessing in their mind, and vice versa, right? You can bestow a blessing, which is crossing my boundaries. Like, I'd like to offer you a blessing. Get away from me. I don't want religious stuff, you've just crossed my boundary, right? So you can give energy that is intended with goodwill, meaning you're wishing the other well, and that's why you're doing whatever it is you're doing. But the other person receives it as a curse, a toxicity, a violation, a horrible outcome, whatever, associates all kinds of meaning. Like, for example, in a homophobic culture, someone who is homosexual from, an inclusive culture might show appreciation for a young man in the homophobic culture, which is going to expose the young man to torment and terror, teasing, humiliation, feeling like they're dirty and all that, just because someone said, gee, you look beautiful. And so, they might feel incredibly hostile because of the byproduct. They don't mind being told they look handsome or beautiful, they mind the next 3 years of psychological torture by the members of their own cult that do not, embrace that expression, right? That are afraid of it, whatever, but have put a meaning on it. And so the cultural game consists of filling up these words with a variety of charges, of meanings, that often have very little to do with biology, with science, with even, they may have nothing to do with large cultural trends. You can think of, for example, the radical atheists that are quite prominent in our own culture are the minority in 99% of all culture, right? 99% of all of the tens of thousands of cultures across the world and over time believe in some form of creative force that gives rise to the external expression of life. And an atheist says, no, it has absolutely no meaning. I know, I have faith, right? I have faith in the meaninglessness of existence, right? It means absolutely nothing. Or it means something, but I have faith that it all comes to an end as soon as the body dies, right? I have faith that there is no permanence in consciousness, or I have faith that consciousness doesn't exist. I consciously have faith in that, an atheist may say. And so these are, the containers of words, the containers of, paradigm words and groups of words will contain a mixture of the physiological reactions that a child, an adolescent has observed, that an adult has, or a grown-up has observed in the people around them. So how many thousands of people have viscerally demonstrated a reaction to this? How intense is that reaction? So that's another thing. Then there's the behavior response. How many people have changed their behavior because of this thing? Then there's the financial thing. How many people, for example, racism as an act of faith is stronger than capitalism. And you know that because a capitalist wants to make money. That's their number one objective, is to turn a profit, right? And so if someone comes into their business of a different race and they refuse to make money, what they're saying is, I believe in racism more than I believe in capitalism, right? I'm praying to the God of segregation more than I'm praying to the God of profit, right? Because the profitable thing to do is to take the money. The racist thing to do is to send out your customers and exclude a certain percentage of the world from being a customer, no matter how much money they have, right? Because a racist, like you'd think, like, okay, how about I'll pay twice as much? How about this race pays twice as much money, so you get triple your profit. Like that whole extra bit, your materials aren't going up. You've got all this profit, right? But a racist says, no, I don't care how much money, right? I am devoted to, the God of segregation, right? I'll starve to death. In fact, I will kill my children if necessary, rather than make money. I'll skip college for my kids, right? You could double your business and send no. I'll whatever it takes. The number one loyalty, right, is I'm going to not engage in this way with this group of people based on skin color, right? So, so then you watch someone change their behavior based on skin color. You watch their visceral reaction. So their body is responding, their behavior is responding. You watch them do the exact opposite of what they normally do, meaning a typical American will do anything to make $100, right? Well, they'll do all kinds of things, eat beetles on TV, do this, whatever, right, to make some money, right? But no, we will not serve black people at this restaurant, and so it's an odd 180, isn't it, right? Over this, right? And so this is charging the young psyche with an awareness that this is a really, really, really big deal, right? Then there's how consistently it's done. Like, is this 10% doing this weird thing, or is 95% people doing this weird thing? And then finally, what's the rank, right? What's the rank? And then finally, does it extend into, we'll kill you, right? If you're gay in certain parts of the world, you will be killed for showing affection to another person, right? So these are the ways that the structures of language are charged. And then there's a boundary usually, like holding hands. Oh, you're gay, right? So you have these charged objects. And then there's you're over here. And the question is, does these charged things have anything to do with you, right? Well, ultimately, we know that they all have something to do with us, right? Right? Because, well, depending on how far we want to go back, right? We all emerged out of the Big Bang, didn't we, right? At one point, the entire universe was this big, right? Which means that every single thing in our life was once this close to us, right? If we want to bring things back to the Big Bang. So, we were all 1 second old at one point, and we were all a few millimeters wide, right? The entire world. Our best friend, our worst enemy, this planet, that planet, the South Pole, the North Pole, everything in between, everything in existence used to exist this big. And then it all diverged into different sections of the possibility field, of the probability field, of the actuality of our reality, right? So they're all ancestors, right? And they're all very close. But obviously you cannot diverge. If you want the universe to expand, right, you've got to have variation. You've got to have diversity, right? You don't get expansion with monocultures. Right? You get expansion with sex. And what sex means is that two distinct patterns of energy come together in such a way to give birth to a third distinct pattern of energy that can in turn give birth to something else. That's how the universe gets bigger, right? The universe gets bigger through sex. This atom comes together with this atom and forms a molecule. That's sex, right? This animal comes together with this animal and has a child with new genetic material that comes from both, and the world becomes more diverse. The world gets bigger. It's sex, right? So we know it's all connected at some level, right? But these highly charged, condemned tubs of energy, whatever it is, abortion, homosexuality, murder, power grabbing, embezzling, breaking the law, whatever it is, these buckets we try and keep away. No. That's my uncle may have done that, twice removed, but not me. It has nothing to do with me, right? And these other things, the good things, right, that are wonderful and amazing, PhDs, lots of money, whatever the cult is blessing at that moment in time. At other times it's seashells. Like, look at them. They've got the best collection of seashells. Clearly they should be the chief, right? You're tall and articulate. Clearly you should be the chief, right? It's different symbols at different times that may or may not relate to anything, rational, right? And rational is big, right? Rational has been really, really big over the last 500 years. And it's one of the main deities today, right? That's not rational. No, it isn't. It's happy. But who wants happiness if it's not rational, right? Happiness has become subjugated to rationality, right? I'm miserable, but I see things clearly, right? In other words, happiness, misery, irrelevant as long as we're thinking rationally. So rationality, quite a high deity in our culture. It may get questioned at some point. I think there's a study that shows that the more university degrees you have, the less likely you are to enjoy your life. Right? Statistically, if you take a random person with barely a high school education or no high school education, statistically they're likely to be happier than someone with 3 or 4 doctoral degrees. Right, and you can see that in their physiology and their satisfaction with life, et cetera, how much they smile and enjoy the moment and things like that. So the question then is, who's going to be lumped to and asked to carry around all these charged things, right? Because you can't charge up, a word or a demographic and then nobody carries it around, right? So the cult or culture charges up certain things at different moments in time, right? And they're changing all the time. Different cultures charge different items, and any given culture has a grayscale. Things that were acceptable 100 years ago are outrageous, unacceptable today, right? Which means that everything done today will be pathetic, outdated, child abuse 100 years from now, right? So you are a child abuser. You are absurd. You are backwards. You're ignorant. You're a fool 100 years from now, right? Or you're wonderful, evolved, libertarian, ecological, whatever, 100 years ago, right? So forward thinking, considering the environment. We didn't do that 100 years ago. Look at you, right? But, there's this moving target. Now, the game is to link certain people. Now, in the past, they were kind enough to link them to goats. They're called scapegoats. Mom has a couple of goats. Twins were the preferred thing. So you have a couple of goats, and one of the twins is the evil twin, the bad goat, right? How do they know, right? Well, you make up some code, don't you? And then one of the goats is going to be more like that code. You have to make something up, like if a black stripe is going there, that's black is evil. Why? Because we made it up. 2, stripe. Why? Because we made that up as well. That goat has the black stripe. Oh, right? If you go around telling everyone that black stripes are bad because we said so, and that's why they're bad, then the question is, will they believe you, right? If you beat them, if you traumatize them, if they're right about some other things, well, then a child believes them, right? Okay, there's a black stripe on a goat, okay? What else have we made up? Well, we've got to, drive this goat out into the desert. We've got to stone them to death because they're evil. We had to banish the evil spirit, right? So you take the goat, you stone it half to death, you drive it out into the desert. Now you've got less food, of course. The goat's not enjoying itself either. But, it's a goat, which, at least if you're a human, right, is probably better than if it's you, right? But now we turn our scapegoat on our children, right? So we've long since moved past driving goats out into the desert and stoning them, right? What a waste of meat, right? But now we do it to our children, right? So, for example, in our cult, I think there's like 80% of the juveniles that we condemned to death in our cult had been are boys, first of all, and had been sexually molested by older men. Now, we charge the whole pot of gay, right? So we tell the boy through horrific charge dynamics, right? Everyone being silent, everyone whispering, all these things. So the child understands that this is this horribly charged, huge deal if they are a homosexual, right? And then an older person who's supposed to protect the child from horrible things betrays the trust of the child, right? And links them with this highly charged subject that then tells them how disgusting, how they're going to go to hell, how horrible they are, and that it's unspeakable, and blah, 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 blah. And then everyone turns a blind eye on the child that's been molested by an older man repeatedly and leaves the kid to figure out, what are you going to do with it, right? You've just been told that, if you're good, God will reward you, right? Well, you haven't been rewarded, right? Because the cult has told you that this isn't a reward. This is horrible and unspeakable, right? So you're told that you're bad. You're told you're going to go to hell. You're told all of this stuff. You're told that if you tell anyone, you'll be laughed at because you see that happening, right? And you've been betrayed by someone you trusted into this state, right? Well, kids who are left to deal with this bundle of charge do not do very well with it, right? They tend to lash out at humanity for setting them up to play this little game of musical chairs. And so they do violent, things that are consistent with that image of, being this horrible person. Now, we turn around and put them to death, right? So it's one of those things where we set the child up to fail in 1,000 different ways. The child does fail, and then we humiliate them for failing. The child fails some more, and they commit a variety of crimes, and we put them to death because we're a just cult, right? That's what we do, and it's called, it's scapegoating a child this time instead of a goat, right? It's scape-childing rather than scapegoating. Well, is that really evolution, right? Wouldn't we be better off if, when a child commits crimes based on, a setup, if we stoned a goat and drove it off into the desert and we had one less goat rather than one less child? Well, that's cultural evolution. That's modernity for you. We kill our children, they killed their goats. And so, and of course, these words all have charge. The word cult has a bunch of charge to it, but it is the root word of culture. What is a culture? It's a group of people that agree to do the same thing, even when it makes no sense. Right? In a culture, you say, hey, how are you? When you're thinking, I want to get home and I do not want to hear how these people are. I want to get home. But I say, how are you? Why do you say, how are you, when you don't want to know? Right? That's not rational. That's not really that friendly to waste someone's time telling you when you're thinking, God, shut up, right? It's cult-like though, isn't it, right? We do it because we did it, because we've watched it being done, and that's what we do, right? That's called cult thinking, right? It's not mature, it's not developed, it's not rational, it's not intelligent, it's cult-like. Right? And that's the foundation of a culture, right? We eat our food and say, that was very nice, ma'am, even though it was disgusting, right? I hate peas, but peas were served. The right thing to do is to eat peas. Now, who says that? Wouldn't the right thing to do be to alert the host to one's dietary preferences ahead of arriving? Wouldn't that be the right thing to do? No. The right thing to do is the host serves what they want to serve, and the person eats it and says how lovely it was, even if they hated it, right? Even if it made them sick, right? That's the thing to do. And there's a tremendous amount of cult programming around food. You eat what the host says, blah, blah, blah. But there are also groups, there are also cults where you can talk about what you like and where it's the host's job to find out what the guest likes, right? And serve that, right? Those are just different cults, right? Hopefully the kind of cult, host you would enjoy. So, but the word cult has a lot of charge to it. It just means automatic conformity, right? We all automatically conform to any number of things. You drive on the right side of the road in the United States. Why? Everyone does it. And you're likely to get in an accident if you don't, right? And so it's not just blind conformity. Hopefully there's a little bit of intelligence behind some of these norms. But many times there is not. There's a divergence from the data. So the cults load up language, and then each of us are exposed to the things that the cult has pre-charged and predetermined. We don't get to determine, if we have a lisp, for example, and we talk like this. We have a lisp, and we don't get to decide whether in this cult that's a laughable thing, so everyone stands around and points and says, he's talking funny. Or if this is a empathy point, right? That's cult-derived. We just have the lisp, right? And then the cult has a protocol based on what the majority does on how to respond to that, right? The more sociopathic the cult, the more anomalies are responded to with fear and humiliation. The more empathic the cult, the more anomalies are responded to with understanding and empathy. So that's it for now, and thanks for watching. I'm Dane Rose, and I want to begin by highlighting one of the most shocking things that I've discovered at age 47, which is that no one has, and perhaps no one ever will, introduce me to life. No one's ever sat me down at any point and said, this is how life works, this is why it works. These are the most important aspects of life. And I find that incredible. Now, when that thought occurred to me, that 700 books in, that hundreds of courses in, that decades of introspection and learning into this life, I still didn't have a formal introduction to what this is all about, right? It seems absurd, right? So there's a moment of criticism. Why hasn't anyone pointed these things out, right? And it's fun. The adolescent's job is to criticize the inevitable and innate imperfections of everything, including the cultural blind spots that see so many of us going through life without knowing what's going on. But it's the adult's job to do something about it, right? The world is not perfect. The world is not fair. And if something bothers us, what to do about it? And this book, An Introduction to Life, is my response to that critique, my response to that irritation, that imperfection in my life. And although there are well over 100 chapters, it's the biggest book, naturally, it's a big topic, that I've ever written, I thought I'd just randomly pick a few of the chapters and, you know, to get a little bit of a sense of what's involved. So on the first, let's see, the first thing we've got the big picture, evolution. We've got the 4 operating systems of the brain, the 4 brains, and the protocols they use to filter information and make decisions. The sociopathic or reptilian brain, the rational or pattern organizing brain, the empathic brain and its decision-making protocol, and the transcendent brain, right? Now, that's one of the most revolutionary understandings that I've come across that nobody introduced me to. If we go on to 3 random pictures or windows into the book on the next page of the contents, we've got the ego, self, and breathing. We've got chauvinism and its cultural underpinnings. We've got optimal roles. We've got PTSD, a stunning thing that I didn't learn about until I was 40 years old, that has more than a 30% invisible influence on every person and on the culture as a whole. The culture and its cult-like nature, how it can be our enemy, how it can be our friend, what its role is. We have cult and ego architecture, just going into that a little bit more deeply. The next page of, you know, another 50 chapters, we've got key cycles in life, things that you want to be aware that repeat themselves over and over again, that have throughout history, the history of humanity, and will continue to repeat themselves. What are those key cycles and how do we attune to those? Emotional literacy, right? What is an emotion? How is it different from a feeling? Now, in a psychologically illiterate culture, we don't know the difference between an emotion and a feeling, as evidenced by the fact that you, as a representation of the 99%, cannot articulate it clearly. And if you do, your articulation will not agree with the next person. Feelings and emotions, right? Positive and negative emotions. Are they the same as good and bad? Like all of this, you know, any one of these things takes years to understand with wisdom and depth, right? But in most cases, we don't even know that we don't know about it. Grounded to reptile, right? Why we regress to the reptilian brain in traumatic states, right? Why our tether is the oldest brain. Purpose and meaning, how do we organize it? What is meaningful and what is not meaningful? Do you know the core ingredient in meaning? How to increase a life of meaning, how to decrease a life in meaning, right? Every question is a quest, and what are the quests that you're on? That's another page. 2 more tables of content pages. The deepest cuts to our humanity, right? We all live in a cult, in a culture, with a norm, a normal pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being. And how do those norms undermine the human operating, which is the empathic operating system in our brain? Understanding the math of cultural impact, investing in our future, individually and globally. Losing oneself. What does it mean when we say we lose ourself? What is that self, right? And when is it good to lose ourselves and find a new pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being? And when is it a disaster? When is it a crisis to lose ourselves and perhaps regress to an older pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, being? We have advice, criticism, and direction. Some tips, right, in life. Get excellent at something. The circle in life, right? Why is the circle the most fundamental shape in geometry, in the liminal space between masculine and feminine, between duality and the one? Right? Learn from nature, right? When wrong ideas are right, right? When does a wrong idea take us in the right direction for our sustainable well-being? It's not true, but it takes us to a better place. And in those instances, do you cling to what's true, or do you value the improvement that comes to your life? So a very light dive into the table of contents. But my belief, from thousands of conversations, hundreds of books, talking with various teachers, etc., my belief is that if you are exceptional, right, if you are an architect of ideas, if you understand the building blocks of consciousness and ideas and the way they create the illusion of our reality, that you can read a book like this and spark 12 or more % of new gestalts, of new configurations, right, of your consciousness, of your frameworks. You can iterate, you can evolve. If you're a naive teenager, as I was, 90% of this is useful grist for the mill, new populations of consciousness, of ideas, right? If you're an average middle-aged person, as I am, 30% of this, if you'll skim the chapters and highlight, ooh, there might be something there for me, it might be something there here, there might be something there, and then come back and actually read those chapters that speak to you, or use it as an I Ching and open up to something. That there is going to be things that you didn't know that are useful, that can propel you to a better quality of life. And that's what makes a book an act of love, right? It's an act of creativity. But love, is a process. You have the love of need. I need you, the infant. Right? You have the love of desire. I want you, the adolescent. But then you have the love of giving. First to ourselves, adult love, and then to others, right? I'm still learning. This book was a gift for me. Someone introduced me to life through this book, right? And 30% of the ideas catalyzed have had a positive impact in the course of articulating and writing, etc. But they may also be fruitful for you. That's the gift of the information age of technology. It's not either or. Right? Once I wrote the book for me, I can print more copies for you without diluting. Right? It's a gift to me to talk with someone who's read this book as opposed to someone who hasn't. Right? So, loving enough to care, caring enough to take time, taking enough time to see, seeing enough to understand what is being seen, understanding enough to empathize, to transcend the rational brain into the human realm of empathy, understanding enough to empathize, and empathizing with understanding enough to attune, and attuning successfully enough to succeed at facilitating survival, security of survival, a sense of love and belonging, self-esteem, the articulation of ideals and the paths that take us towards those ideals, called principles or best practices. And the respect we earn by following the best practices that create the world that we state that we want, right? Earned love, self-esteem. By developing our gifts, discovering what they are. I'm good at math. I'm good at listening in a way that people say things they've never said before. Discovering my gifts. And then bringing those gifts deeper and deeper into the world in a way that creates abundance for myself, for others, that creates value. And finally, serving something, becoming a part of something bigger than ourselves. That's adult love, and it's a process of blossoming, right? And if a book facilitates self-awareness, understanding, empathy, facilitates action that leads to increased survival, security, love and belonging, self-esteem, discovery and development of our talents and gifts, bringing those into the world, and becoming part of something bigger. If it does that, we have succeeded at bringing a profound state of love, a transformative state, a useful state of love, an adult state of love into the world.